On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Brian Chee and Mr. Curtis Franklin here today. Now, virtual workspaces have helped organizations apply in legacy applications in the cloud. Now, we're going to talk about a recent acquisition that might just surprise our audience. Plus, AI and HPC workloads are heavy on computation and require some major horsepower behind them. Today, we have a really interesting and fun guest, Mr. Andrew Feldman. He's founder and CEO of Cerebras Systems. And we're going to talk about how they are revolutionizing the industry with scalable compute and unlimited potential. Definitely shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 498, recorded June 17th, 2022. Size matters. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Intel, orchestrated by the experts at CDW. Deliver multi-layer security and remote manageability with the Intel vPro platform, powered by 12th gen Intel Core processors. Learn more at cdw.com/Intel client. And by Nureva. Traditional audio conferencing systems can entail lots of components. Installation can take days, and you might not get the mic coverage you need. That's complex expensive. But Nureva Audio is easy to install and manage, no technicians required, and you get true full room coverage that's easy economical. Learn more at Nureva.com. And by Linode. Develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier. Get $100 in credit. Visit linode.com/TWiT. Welcome to This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world's connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide to this big world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals and the experts, starting with our very own Mr. Brian Chee, architect of Sky Fiber and all-around tech geek. Chee, great to see you, my friend. I thought of you this week, actually. Article about rising oceans causing issues for underwater cabling. You know just a bit about that, right?
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing is just yesterday, there was a big, giant article on king tides, which the tides are so high that they're actually rolling in on some Waikiki hotels. And they're going up the storm drains and flooding a fairly good-sized industrial area in the Honolulu general area. So it's going to be interesting. When I was with the University of Hawaii, king tides was a very big deal. Because they're eroding the foundations on a lot of houses and some hotels. Right. But king tides isn't just Hawaii; it's all over the Pacific. And the world is changing. And if you didn't know that, you should know it now.
You're under a rock. Thanks, Steve, for being here. We also have to welcome back senior analyst at MDN, our security and enterprise expert, Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, you had some more traveling this week, right? This time to the Sin City. How did that go?
It went well. I was indeed in Las Vegas most of the week, got back last night. I was out at Splunk's conference, the Conf 22. Heard and saw a lot of really interesting stuff. And as was true the week before at RSA, it was nice to be back out meeting people in real life once again. I've got some writing that I've been doing about that. And at the end of the show, have a webinar coming up next week that I'd love to tell folks about. So staying busy here in the City Beautiful.
Fantastic. And I'll give it to Splunk. I'll give them one thing. They really know how to develop a community and an ecosystem. Any big news that surprised you there?
No, the big thing that's going on with Splunk is that they are going further into some capabilities, especially in things like security. It's a delicate dance they're doing with some of their partners. In other words, how far can you go in offering a capability before you start stepping on the toes of a company that has traditionally offered that on top of your platform? But they seem to be doing the dance pretty well. And as always, their community was outstanding. Nice to see lots of folks walking around in the traditional black Splunk fez that indicated that they are a serious part of the Splunk community.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Curtis, for being here. We have lots to talk about, so let's go ahead and jump in. Virtual workspaces have helped organizations bring legacy applications to the cloud. We're going to talk about a recent acquisition that might just surprise our audience and what the parent company might actually do with this. We'll go into that. Plus, AI and HPC workloads are heavy on computation and require some horsepower behind them. Today, we have Andrew Feldman. He's founder and CEO of Cerebras Systems. And we're going to talk about how they are revolutionizing the industry here with scalable compute and unlimited potential. So lots to talk about later on in the show. So definitely stick around. But first, like we always do, let's go ahead and jump into this week's news blips. Now, we covered RSA in last week's episode, and info continues to come from that conference. Now, in a recent article from the News Stack, they posted the Cloud Security Alliance's top threats for cloud computing for 2022. Now, can you guess what's on that list? Well, at the top of the list is misconfiguration and inadequate change control. Now, that contains a bunch of threats there, including unsecreted data storage, excessive permissions, which we talk about often, default creds, standard security controls disabled, unrestricted access to ports and services, and unsecured secrets, to just name a few. And also near the top is lack of cloud security architecture and strategy. Now, without proper planning, customers will be vulnerable to the cyber attacks that can result in financial losses, reputational damage, and legal and compliance issues. Now, I bet you won't be surprised to find that insecure software development and unsecure third-party resources is right up there on the list as well. Now, with all the call-outs of supply chain hacks in the last year and the fact that most organizations don't have a bill of tech materials for all their software, they can be vulnerable on many fronts. Plus, organizations don't often follow compliance practices for software development as well. Now, one item that was on the list that's not a surprise is the misconfiguration and exploitation of serverless and container workflows. Why? Well, because some of these are very challenging to configure and get right for security, let alone secure them. What I hope happens in the space is service providers have better out-of-the-box set of solutions and settings, as well as turnkey solutions to help solve these challenges. Wouldn't that be nice? Now, check out CSA's website for the rest of the items on the list. You might just be surprised what you find on there.
Hey, what's the difference between a feature and a vulnerability? In some cases, it comes down to whose fingers are on the keyboard. Case in point, researchers are warning that a feature used in many best practices documents for users of Office 365 can put SharePoint Online and OneDrive libraries at risk for ransomware. In fairness, the attack involves a number of steps, though the researchers have documented the attack chain from initial credential compromise to account takeover, discovery, exfiltration, and ultimately the demand for ransom. Now, this attack would not be fast if it were successful because, among other things, it involves rendering all the stored backup copies of the files unrecoverable. Something done through tactics like creating too many versions of a file or reducing the version limits of a document library. Edits that increment a version of a file include changes to the document contents, file name, file metadata, and the file encryption status. Now, files that are stored in a hybrid state on both endpoint and cloud, like through cloud sync folders, will reduce the impact of this risk as the attacker is unlikely to have access to the local and endpoint files. To perform a full ransom flow, the attacker will have to compromise the endpoint and the cloud account to access the endpoint and cloud stored files. It's not likely, takes a lot of work, but it is something that security professionals and power users should be on the lookout for because now we know that it's possible.
So this press release comes from the folks at Cisco AppDynamics, and I'm going to read a little bit because this is an interesting press release. So Cisco has launched AppDynamics Cloud, a cloud-native observability platform for modern applications which are based on increasingly complex distributed architectures and service. Yes, this is a press release, I know. Designed for simplicity, usability, and intuitive, it empowers IT teams to deliver the exceptional digital experiences currently demanded by businesses, consumers, and end users. So some of the features is they maximize business outcomes, they provide open telemetry standards, and it allows them to ingest a lot of different telemetry data generated across the entire IT stack to help create actionable insights into application performance and security. Now, the press release is worth reading. It's got some interesting things, and I should mention that while it is a different business unit, Cisco Meraki is a sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Technology. So it is a flag. This press release I bring up, normally I don't read press releases, but it is a flag indicating a change in network and systems management to a more integrated platform, and could potentially spell a move towards an industry-wide aggregation trend.
As if deploying ransomware to organization machines and extorting them to make money wasn't enough for cybercriminals, now they want to post dedicated websites for people to check what data and if their data was stolen in an attack. How nice of them. Now, in a recent article from Bleeping Computer, the Alpha V ransomware gang, also named for their use of Black Hat ransomware, has changed the game for extortion. The data they steal is used in a double extortion scheme where they ask for ransom in order to decrypt the data, but also promise to not publicly release the data to the wild. And to add to some additional pressure, the group is posting metadata of the stolen riches, if so you can search and find out what was actually stolen. Not only that, they email victims in a very e-commerce-like way and remind them they can check out their data on the site. Now, in a recent attack on a hotel and spa in Oregon, the group actually stole 120 or 112 gigs of data, including social security numbers of 1,500 employees. Now, they proceeded to create the website for the hotel to view what was stolen. Personally, I think this is playing with neuroscience in an order of subconsciously creating a sense of urgency and a fear for people to pay ransoms more consistently. What do you think? Innovative or a waste of time? Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get to the bites, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Intel, orchestrated by the experts at CDW. Now, in today's bumpy hybrid work world, the knowledgeable people at CDW really get what it takes to keep your business productive and protected. They understand that while your needs may change, securing your hybrid workforce never will. That's why CDW works with Intel and can help it design a secure remote management solution that works for you. Now, with Intel's vPro platform powered by 12th gen Intel Core processors and custom configured by CDW, you get hardware-based, multi-layered security that will protect against threats. But Intel's vPro platform doesn't stop there. It gives you peace of mind for your business and business class performance all in one. Now let's talk remote manageability. Now, no matter where your hybrid workforce is going or working, management can access, control, and fix devices from anywhere, even outside the firewall, which means no matter where your teams are working from, you're still in control. And when you're in control, you can relax, because the Intel's vPro platform powered by the 12th gen Intel Core processors, your teams will be more productive and power through disruptions, letting you and your business focus on other things. For secure remote management and security, trust Intel vPro and IT orchestration by CDW. People who get it. Learn more at cdw.com/Intel client. And we thank CDW for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the bites. Now, virtual workspaces have helped organizations bring legacy applications to the cloud. And one of the players in the game was Awingu, who actually turned legacy applications and SaaS applications to a browser accessible application for organizations. But just recently, there was an interesting acquisition that happened. What's going on there, Chee?
Well, Corel, we've known them as Corel Draw. That's what a lot of people recognize them for. But a lot of folks don't realize that Corel also owns WordPerfect. Now, WordPerfect was the monster in the legal and medical world, mostly because they spent a lot of time and energy building industry-specific dictionaries, which is kind of a cool thing. Anyway, we interviewed Awingu, in fact, the CEO, back in episode 204. And we also interviewed their competition, Ericom, back in episode 99. Both solutions provide HTML5 based remote desktop, remote app solutions and bypasses the need to purchase separate RDP gateways. Now, keep in mind, an RDP gateway is a lot of moving parts, especially when you start dealing with single sign-on and getting all the trust relationships right. I actually used a Citrix-based system and also an Ericom-based system for a building infrastructure management program at the University of Hawaii, where we were running 3D Revit from Autodesk on iPads, but we were actually running them in virtual machines. And iPads were just using the campus Wi-Fi. But the whole deal behind it was we needed to be able to have a modified 3D model of all our buildings as built. The students actually went and measured every room, every door, and so forth, and modified them. So that's a pretty cool thing. Now, what's really interesting is Awingu is now going to be combined with the Parallels remote application server platform. And that's going to do some really interesting things, because right now, if you want to run GPU-based remote desktop type of things, you're going to have to be running the Remote FX client if you're on the Microsoft world, or you need to be running the VMware or the Citrix. So that means you have to have a platform that supports those types of remote GPUs. They also handle the syncing if you're trying to do any kind of codec-based work like Zoom, WebEx, Teams, you name it. So if you have, just the reason why this is a big deal is if the codecs, audio and video codecs, are at the virtual machine, the latency from the virtual machine to the client can really throw video conferencing codecs way out. So a lot of changes were made to those clients, and they're now done at the client and then also at the remote, at the virtual machine. Anyway, so there's been some really big changes in the world of virtual desktops to the point where we're now starting to have conversations with different people about managed desktops. In fact, I was talking to a fairly major tier 1 ISP in the United States. We're talking about actually trying to modify or use the HTML5 based clients, web clients, in DOCSIS set-top boxes, so that we could start offering, and this was 10 years ago, start offering managed desktops to their subscribers, which was kind of neat. It's changing. That's now a reality. People are starting to offer managed desktops, Microsoft specifically, but you can do some neat things. Now, Awingu and Ericom are both fairly big players in this game. Awingu is based, I believe, in the Netherlands. Ericom is based in Israel. One of the other things in the security world that they are both very good at, and I should mention also that Citrix has something similar, so does VMware, is that you can have virtual machine sandboxes. And those sandboxes basically give you the ability that you go and do your thing. And then once you terminate the session, all the things that could be persistent, all the worms, all the malware that could potentially be infecting that virtual machine, go poof. Such things have existed, but what I think this is going to start doing is start making it more of a package deal. So as far as I'm concerned, this is going to make this more approachable. It's going to make it easier. My personal prediction, this is just me sharing my crystal ball, because Corel owns the WordPerfect suite, I have a sneaky hunch they're going to offer it as a managed desktop solution with all those things thrown in. And keeping in mind, WordPerfect still rules the legal world, and they're still very popular with some doctors. So could be interesting. So I'm going to throw it first to Curt, only because there was some really interesting things that happened. It was basically a fight between Ray Norda at Novell and Microsoft's Bill Gates. Corel, WordPerfect didn't win, but Corel bought them, and they've kept WordPerfect on life support. So, Curt, what do you think? You think maybe my crystal ball is foggy, or do you think maybe, just maybe, WordPerfect might be making a comeback?
I think WordPerfect could make a comeback because remember, WordPerfect, as you pointed out, is still very heavily used in the legal profession. So you have a particular niche, a high-profile niche, where it's used. And this is a perfect example of a market where getting the service from the cloud makes a ton of sense. Now, we do have to point out one thing. In many of these cases, like legal profession, they're going to be happy using the application that's web-based, but they're going to want to store their files in a location that they control, either on-prem or in a separate private cloud. What this does is add complexity to the environment. We are already getting into a case where for a company of any size, it's highly unlikely that the CIO actually knows how many web applications, services, platforms, whatever they're running. And when I talk to people who specialize in visibility, they say that CISOs and CIOs are often off by an order of magnitude when they talk about such things. So complexity is still an issue, but this is a case where we're seeing the possibility of a cloud-based application suite that could find a happy and welcome home in a bunch of folks who, let's say, are some of the original influencers.
Awesome. Hey, our Mr. Lou, you use Parallels. What do you think?
Yeah.
You think this might be a good move?
I think this is interesting. I think this is really interesting. Corel just kind of came out of the woodwork and made this acquisition. I think they're getting a lot of things here. I think obviously they're getting the the Parallels brand portfolio there. I'm a big fan of Parallels. I use it on my Mac. Helps me virtualize Windows on there. So I'm very happy about that. So I think this is very interesting. I think another interesting thing that a lot of people have been talking about, I've seen some news articles about it, is the fact that they are also adding zero trust technology too that comes with the Awingu acquisition to a lot of the things that they do. So I'm actually really interested to see where they go with this. I feel like this might be just enough technology to help them pivot slightly and maybe do something different. So we'll see. I mean, they could go in and start actually implementing, using some of these VDI solutions and implementing a lot of their software that they already support. But this also means they get to support, a lot of legacy applications that comes from the industry. I mean, there's a huge offering there to say, hey, like you have a legacy application that runs on-prem or maybe even in a hybrid workspace. And then, you have some people who need to, use an iPad instead, and they can't because they, it's only works on Windows or something. And this allows them now to use other devices, some devices that might even be easier to actually move around with and, be in the workplace and the remote workforce as well, and still use the old legacy application. So I think that this might be the thing that helps them kickstart new parts of their business. So we'll see what happens. I'm very interested to see.
Yeah, this is when I saw this story, is like, wow, okay, that's really interesting. Especially because I've done a Citrix, I've done a Microsoft, I've done a VMware, and I've done Ericom, and I got introduced to the Awingu. The gateway complexity for an HTML5 based remote desktop, remote app application is dramatically less. I spent weeks fine-tuning and tweaking the Citrix. I had lots of headaches doing the Microsoft RDP gateway, and they were all complex because of the SSO. The install for the HTML5 based gateway was literally 10 minutes. So Corel may have bought into some really interesting technology. And the gentleman we spoke to at Awingu they are a very aggressive little company, and their vertical market that they've taken on is quite a portfolio. So I'm going to watch these guys closely, and you betcha I'm friends with the CEO on LinkedIn.
Thanks, Brian. I mean, I'm very interested. I would be interested to be a fly in the wall of those acquisition experts over there at Corel, and when they said, let's go buy this company and reinvigorate our business. Should be very interesting to see. Thanks, Brian. Well, next up, we have an interesting guest to talk about a very interesting topic, so definitely stick around. But before we go there, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Nureva. And you and I both know that hybrid work is here to stay, and that means people might be heading back to the office and others might be working remotely. Now, in-person meetings need to have a great setup to ensure that the more workers can stay as part of the conversation. Now, complicated and costly, that's how it's been the state of audio conferencing for larger workspaces for a long time. Now, choosing a traditional system might entail a difficult design software and selecting from a dizzying array of separate mics, speakers, DSPs, and more. In those cases, installation usually requires outside technicians to come in, and it's awfully highly invasive and expensive, but plus it could take your room offline for days. Now, the industry was definitely primed for the same type of leap in technology that had transformed and simplified other sectors of the market. Now, Nureva made that leap when they created revolutionary microphone mist technology. This is amazing technology. With this patented technology, 1 or 2 integrated microphone and speaker bars fill a room with thousands of virtual microphones. Now, there are no dead zones with this, and everyone can be heard everywhere in the room. Now, meeting and class participants can simply talk and move naturally in the space and still be heard by remote participants. Now, thanks to continuous audio calibration, your rooms are instantly and always ready with optimized audio. No outside technician required. Now, Nureva also simplified installation. It's a 30-minute do-it-yourself job. That means big savings on time and cost compared to traditional systems. Now, they simplified management too. Nureva Console gives IT the power to monitor, manage, and adjust their systems from anywhere. No need for IT to go from room to room. So ask yourself if you want to go with the costly and complicated traditional system or make the leap to simple and economical Nureva. Learn more at nureva.com. That's NUREVA.com. And we thank Nureva for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show where I get to bring in a guest who drops the knowledge on the TWiT right. Today we have Andrew Feldman. He's founder and CEO of Cerebras Systems. Andrew, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Now, Cerebras is doing some amazing things in the world of hardware and AI, but our audience loves to hear people's origin stories. So we'd like to start with that and maybe take us on a journey through tech and what brought you to Cerebras.
Sure. The founding team at Cerebras had all worked together at a previous company, a company called C Micro. And we built a computer that was extraordinarily energy efficient. And we started that in 2007, sold it to AMD for a little over $1/3 billion in 2012. And by 2014, we'd sort of left and gone our different ways. And late 2015, we wanted to get the band back together again. And one of the great things about being an entrepreneur is getting to pick who you work with. And we got together and we wrote 2 things on the whiteboard. We wanted to work together again. And we wanted to transform an industry. We wanted to put our shoulders against an industry and move it. And we wanted to do that in an industry we cared about, in the compute industry. And we began looking at projects. We turned down a ton of really lucrative projects because that's not what we were looking for. We were looking for something that we could build, something that would change the world, something that was worthy of being in the Computer History Museum. And that's been our goal ever since, to pursue a fundamental change in the compute industry for AI.
Love that. I love that. Now, Cerebras has had quite the ride over the last 6 years. You live in a very bleeding edge market with big players like Titan, NVIDIA, GraphCore, Samba Nova, but you're really setting yourself apart with the WSE. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the technology you guys are developing?
Sure. One of the interesting things that a computer architect asks is, what does the compiled software ask of the computer, of the processor? AI is a extremely unusual workload. It is extremely communication intensive. A lot of little tasks that are resolved, and then the results are moved. And we saw an opportunity to use the fact that communication on chip is 10,000 times faster than communication off chip. So we said, if we could build a chip that was 50 or 60 times larger than anybody had ever built, we could keep all the work on a chip. We wouldn't need to communicate across printed circuit boards, through switches. And the result was this. This is our chip. It's 56 times larger than any chip ever made. Ooh. It's 2.55 trillion transistors larger than the largest GPU. It's an 850,000 core machine. And, just to keep going on cool stats, it has 1,000 times more memory than the highest end graphics processing unit. It has 12,000 or 13,000 times more on-chip memory and memory bandwidth. It is a pioneering. This is one of my favorite pictures that you guys have put up in my entire career in the past 25 years, is our chip versus their chip. Right. The result is we do AI work hundreds of times faster. And we had to do fundamental deep tech. Nobody had built a chip this large. Nobody packaged a chip this large. Nobody had powered a chip this large. Nobody had cooled one. Nobody built a chassis for it. We had to do it all. And we had to convince very large companies that this was a ride worth jumping on with us. This was an adventure they would enjoy. We partnered with Taiwan Semiconductor, and they manufacture for us. We have many partners who recognize both the joy and the returns of doing fearless engineering. And that's what we do.
It's amazing. So the truth is, bigger is better. So
bigger is better for this work. I think bigger is obviously worse for a cell phone chip, right? Don't go bigger on a cell phone chip. But AI is different. AI has a huge number of relatively simple calculations, basically multiplies and accumulates. But the results of these need to be moved again and again and again and again. And what ends up limiting your performance is the communication. And if you have to go off chip through a switch, back through a CPU to another GPU again and again, your performance is painfully slow. And as a result, today, large neural networks, the GPT class neural networks, often take hundreds of millions of dollars worth of graphics processing units in order to train. Thousands of GPUs in a cluster. And who can do that? I mean, who can build a cluster of 1,000 GPUs and spread a workload over it? And the answer is very few companies. We came along and said, well, why don't you do it with one system? Right? Why don't we turn months of distributed compute work into 10 minutes of setup? And that's what we do.
It's impressive. Now, obviously, you talk a lot about being able to load large work large amounts of data. You talked about having a lot of memory. How much memory does this unit actually have?
So this has 40 gigabytes of on-chip, sort of layer 0 cache. On-chip. Okay. That's right. Right. So this isn't going off-chip. This is 40 gigabytes of on-chip memory. And, when your memory, all our memory is one clock cycle from a core. So thousands of times faster than if you have to go over an interposer or over to DRAM. Right. And as a result, you are vastly faster at the type of work that is foundational in AI.
Right. And I think the interesting thing here is, having worked on the Itanium processor back in the day, my guess is there's probably some pretty high-speed interconnects between the memory and the actual chips itself.
Well, the memory is interleaved. This is a fully distributed 850,000 core machine. So each of those 850,000 cores has memory. And so memory is one clock cycle, less than a nanosecond away from its core. And so you have just absurd amounts of memory bandwidth. And as you guys know, when you have absurd amounts of memory bandwidth, you can do magic. Right. You can do amazing things when memory bandwidth isn't your bottleneck.
So I want to talk a little bit about what companies, what kind of magic companies are doing on these things. Can you maybe tell us some stories around some of the organizations out there and what they're doing?
Sure. Let's take 2 or 3 different examples. GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoSmithKline had a set of problems that didn't fit on a cluster of GPUs. And we were able to do work in a couple days, 2.5 days, that they couldn't get to work in 26 days over a 16 GPU cluster. And this was pioneering work in epigenomics. And they published it. You can go to, there you go, that's Kim Branson. They've been able to do pioneering research. They've published scientific articles based on things that had never before been possible based on our machine. And their ideas running on our machine. And when you build infrastructure, that's one of the great joys in life, is when your machine is used to make somebody else's ideas fly. Another example is Total Energies. Right, they're one of the 7 largest oil companies in the world, about 190 billion in revenue. There's a part of oil exploration where what we showed was we were 228 times faster than their GPU. And that by adding more GPUs, they didn't cut the gap. And because the problem scales extremely poorly across multiple graphics processing units. So on one hand, you had life sciences, GlaxoSmithKline doing epigenomics, identifying drug targets via genetic work. In another, you have oil exploration. A third example is in the National Energy Technology Laboratory. They're part of the Department of Energy. There they looked at a different class of problems. And what they found was our system was 200 times faster than their supercomputer.
Wow.
And that there was no number of GPUs or CPUs that could be put together to work as quickly as we could. They continued that work and showed that our system uses on order 1,000th the power, and so generates 1,000th the CO2 emissions as does their supercomputer to do the same work. And so those are 3 very, very different applications, one in life sciences, one in energy, one in computational fluid dynamics, all of which our system accelerated by hundreds of X.
I was actually reading. There's several generations of these chips as well. Are you doing generation?
You're exactly right. We're on our 2nd generation. Our 1st generation was a 16 nanometer part. We announced that in August of 2019. In April of 2021, we announced we were shipping a 7 nanometer part, and that's the one I showed you. I'm so proud of it. I keep one with me at all times. Like when I was 8 and I got a dirt bike for my birthday, and I brought it into my room at night. In April of 2021, we announced a 7-nanometer version that was 850,000 cores. We began shipping the system that you just showed your audience there. We began shipping that system Q4 of last year, and we now have equipment deployed in the U.S., in Asia, in Europe, in large enterprises, in military and intelligence applications, and in high-performance computing applications.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we have lots more to talk about. And in fact, my co-hosts here chomping at the bit behind the scenes here. They want to get in and ask some questions. So we'll get back to them just as soon as we come back. But we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Linode. Now, whether you're developing a personal project or managing larger workloads, you deserve simple, affordable, and accessible cloud computing solutions. Now, with Linode, building applications using a simple cloud manager API or CLI, it helps you now quickly scale up or down with standard VMs, dedicated CPUs, and enterprise-grade GPUs. Now, if you haven't chosen Linode yet, you might be asking, why choose Linode? Well, you'll get support experience above the rest. People choose Linode because they demand a better customer support experience. Linode's independence and mission drive them to a different standard where the customer is the driving force behind everything they do. They have pay-as-you-go, predictable, and transparent pricing. Now, Linode pioneered the predictable flat pricing model for cloud computing. No more anxiety over hidden costs. They make it simple to launch and scale in the cloud. Now, with Linode, you'll get flat pricing across every global data center, an intuitive cloud manager, full-featured API, best-in-class documentation, and award-winning support. Linode makes it easy to manage your applications in the cloud. Now, Linode has proven secure and reliable enterprise-grade infrastructure with 11 data centers worldwide, extensive peering relationships, and their next-generation network. Linode delivers the modern infrastructure and performance you need to innovate at scale. Now, I found Linode to be a one-stop shop, so you don't have to look anywhere else. Whatever you want to do, host your website, build your applications, store and back up your media. You can easily launch and enrich your developer applications, hosted services, websites, AI and machine learning workloads, gaming services, or even CI/CD environments. Launch and scale in the cloud with their virtual machines. You can actually choose shared and dedicated compute instances, or you can use your $100 in credit on S3 compatible object storage, managed Kubernetes, and more. Lots of cloud providers can make it difficult to be productive. Some of them have dashboards coming out their ears. Not with Linode. I actually found them really easy to use. In fact, Linode was rated the easiest to use by G2 Crowd in 2021. That's why cloud developers choose Linode, because they make managing complex cloud infrastructure easy. With simple bundled pricing, full-featured API, and 100% human support. Linode helped pioneer cloud computing back in 2003, 3 years before AWS, so they have the longevity you know can be trusted. Develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier. Get $100 in credit. Visit linode.com/TWiT. That's linode.com/TWiT. And we thank Linode for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Andrew Feldman. He's the founder and CEO of Cerebras Systems. Very interesting stuff here, really cool stuff. Kind of a kid in a candy store kind of stuff, for me at least. I do want to bring my co-hosts back in because they have lots to talk about here. Chee, want to go to you first?
I used to work, my second career was with the University of Hawaii School of Ocean, Earth Sciences, and Technology. Our biggest supercomputer user was actually the Japan Weather Project, where they were actually simulating the weather for the entire Pacific. Our biggest problem was cooling the stupid thing.
Turns out the Japanese care a lot about weather and waves. Yeah.
The SOAST was actually the biggest supercomputer user in the University of Hawaii system. So we trained up a lot of students, a lot of postdocs on the message passing interface, MPI, because we had 10 gig low latency switches in between the nodes. It sounds like I don't need that anymore. What kinds of development tools are available, and how do you help people make the migration from an MPI world to your neural processor?
Look, I think anybody who comes on and says they've got the silver bullet for everything, you ought to run the other way. There are a lot of work. Yeah, you ought to in everything, right? We built a machine for optimized for artificial intelligence work, and there are certainly a whole lot of really interesting work out there that's showing AI is as good and sometimes better at weather forecasting than traditional simulation. And there's all sorts of interesting work, even in some of the most challenging problems that supercomputers do, estimating intercontinental ballistic missile trajectories and others that AI can help a great deal. Our system also, by virtue of its architecture, is good at some HPC work. And I think it has been very easy to work with researchers and say, look, all this stuff you had to do, measuring the latency between graphics processing units, all this work you had to do trying to figure out if your giant matrix multiply can fit on a GPU, you don't have to do any of that. It always fits on us. And you don't have to worry about the communication pattern because we take care of that on the processor. And so researchers both in ML, AI, as well as in some fields of HPC have jumped on board. And they can program us with TensorFlow or with PyTorch. They can program us using Python tools. That's a cool picture of our system. They can program us with Python tools. And we have an SDK that allows individuals to write kernels and code directly to our machine using a C-like language. And so there are lots of different ways, but you put your finger on it. The idea is to avoid the need to take dozens of graduate students, train them on MPI, start measuring things in order to spread your workload across the hardware. We get rid of all that junk.
Yeah. I actually used to run a IBM SP2 in my lab at the University of Hawaii, and it was very, very complicated. So
yeah, people forget that the problems of distributing compute across processors when the problem doesn't fit in a single processor is a punishingly complicated problem. And it's true for AI, and it's true for supercompute. The minute the work no longer fits in a single device, you're in a world of hurt. And we change that. We make sure that in AI, even the largest layers of the largest GPT language models can fit with ease on our
that sounds
problem.
Awesome. You know what my other biggest problem was? The care in feeding, cooling, and supplying power. It looks like you guys are using a whole lot less of all of the above.
Well, one of the things I'm sure you guys knew is, as you worked on supercomputers, is just how inefficient they are. When you break up work and start spreading it across graphics processing units, you end up at very low utilization. And that means you're using a ton of power to get very modest increments in performance. There's a professor at Purdue who published a paper about 18 months back, and what he showed that if you want to go 10 times faster than 16 GPUs on an AI workload, you don't use 160 GPUs, you use 800. So to go 10 times faster, you have to use 50 times more power. That's the phenomena you are feeling. And that's why these facilities are now taking tens of megawatts for large AI work.
Oh, yeah. NCSA and Champaign-Urbana actually heats their building with the heat coming off their supercomputers.
Both customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, really exciting
That's
stuff.
pretty awesome. You know, I need to stop hogging you all to myself. I'm sure Curt's got some real interesting.
We can talk for hours after over beer. I mean, I live for this stuff, so I'm happy to keep yakking for days.
Well, I'm going to horn in here for just a second and ask you, for your clients, for your customers, do you find that you're leading with the performance and the ESG stuff is just a kicker, or are they excited about the efficiency and the lower footprint and thrilled to get any sort of performance to go with it?
I think in the artificial intelligence world, the fundamental pain point is how long it takes to train big models. That in many instances, it takes months on thousands of GPUs to train your model. And when we can cut that down to a weekend, 4 days, right, you can test 50 times as many ideas. Right? You can make modifications to your model. When it takes you 10 minutes to set up a model instead of months of the MPI work we just talked about and the measuring and the instrumenting of a cluster, you can test more ideas. This is what sort of it gets the researchers and the ML practitioners so fired up. They're desperate to get out of the world of distributed compute and into the world of spending all day, every day, training their models, making modifications to their models, and having their models get better and better and better. The power is a kicker and is sort of an OpEx kicker, right? The fact that we use a tiny fraction of the power means that their power bills are lower. Often we can pay for a system over its life in power savings. And so I would say it's exactly the way you described, with performance as the primary, and then everybody's really happy at the OpEx.
Well, speaking of being happy with OpEx, the very largest supercomputers have very small customer bases.
They do.
You hit a point where you can count the number of practical customers on the fingers of one hand.
Yeah.
With your combination of technology and operating costs, are you able to expand that potential customer base, beyond half a dozen?
You put your finger on the reason we exist. That's exactly right. Right now, in the AI world, there are about 15 or 20 companies that can train very large models. That's it. And they generally train them on a single data set. And there are hundreds and often thousands of companies who would like to train them, but don't have the expertise to do the distributed compute. They have the AI expertise, but they don't have the distributed compute expertise. And this is what we started the company for. We can take work that Google or Facebook or Amazon or some of the leaders in the world that takes them months and months and months and turn that into minutes and make it available to a much wider swath of the ecosystem. Our goal is to take these super large models out of the realm of hyperscalers only and bring them to large, medium-sized enterprises. And that's been one of the real points of pride as we see companies doing work that they simply couldn't do previously until they acquired a CS2.
Well, one last question, and you sort of bring it up when you talk about some of those very large companies, the Googles, the Amazons, IBMs, the way that smaller companies get access to that power is by leasing time on their AI cloud, leasing time on their system. Is your goal, and are you able to make the compute power available directly to these companies rather than being something that they have to get through a larger service bureau or larger cloud provider?
Sure, Curtis. I think a couple things. I think even from the very large cloud providers, it is extremely difficult and punishingly expensive to get 128 GPUs to work together in a cluster. That's not an offering you can go and click at Azure or AWS or GCP. And if you need 10 times that to do the work, you're building a custom contract, you're renting those, you're out of the cloud world and into your dedicated custom contracts that cost tens of millions of dollars, and they lock you in for years. That's not our way. We have been able to get because they can do that work on 1 or 2 or 4 of our systems, we've been able to deliver that to customers prem. We've been able to show them how our cloud providers can deliver that to them. Our partners who offer our system in the cloud, they can subscribe to it, to a hardware from us. It can be on-prem or off-prem. We've been careful to ensure that many different customers, some who have vast resources like our pharma customers, and others that are startups, can get access to this extraordinary technology.
It's amazing, amazing technology. I do want to ask one last thing for me as well. Now, the chip, is it based on another architecture? Did you start from scratch? Did your engineers actually develop it from the ground up? Like, how did you go about developing this thing?
We did. We designed the instruction set from scratch to be optimized for AI. So we began with a clean sheet of paper and said, what would you design an instruction set to look like if it was optimized for artificial intelligence work? And that's very different than if you repurpose something that for 20 years had been tuned for graphics work. That's very different if you repurpose a general purpose processor like a CPU. This is a machine that was designed from the ground up for this specific class of problems.
So I've got one last question. And
sure.
This is my research cap on.
All right.
We didn't have a chance to talk too much about the Cerebras Cloud at Cerescale. Mm-hmm. Now, as a researcher, we love the internet too because of the low latencies over the wide area network. Is your cloud connected to the internet too?
I believe at Cerescale they do have multiple connections. I think they have a collection of really interesting features. They have megaports, so you can move data from an Amazon. If you've stored your data in S3, if you have your data in one of the other major clouds, they have sort of the equivalent of peering relationships. They're an excellent partner, and we've got a ton of customers who are using our equipment through Cerescale. It's been a game changer.
Yeah, I think I need to go and call up my research buddies and say, hey, dude,
let's do it.
Give these guys a call.
Let's pick a fun problem, Brian, and let's see if we can crush it.
The University of Hawaii bought a Cray, for God's sakes.
We could help them out a little bit.
Right on.
Fantastic. That's amazing, amazing. Time flies, unfortunately, when you're having fun. Andrew, thank you so much for spending time with us. Really super interesting topic. Since we're running low on time, I do want to give you the chance to tell the folks at home or even some of the large organizations out there where they can learn more about Cerebras and maybe how they can get started, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. I think if you'd like to learn a little more, cerebras.net is a good way. If you'd like to talk to me, I'm just Andrew at cerebras.net. If you have a question, we're not going to bombard you with sales guys or spam you. If you'd like information or to be on our mailing list, we're happy to set that up for you. But if you have hard AI problems, if you're working in the domain of NLP or other areas, and you're sort of overwhelmed with the complexity of the problems of distributing this work over your GPU cluster, give us a call. We're eager to help out. We love making your applications fly.
Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another of the best enterprise and IT podcasts in the universe. So definitely tune your podcatcher to TWiT. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host, starting at the very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, what's going on for you in the coming week, and where can people find you and all your work?
Well, I'm going to be doing a bunch of writing, and I've got a webinar coming up on this coming Wednesday. That's June 22nd. It's free. It's on software supply chain attacks, what to do to recognize them, what they are, and what you can do to keep them from ruining your day. This is at, I think, 11 a.m. Eastern time. As I said, it's free. You can go to darkreading.com/Omdia to find the registration link. I would love to see folks there because I think we're going to have some interesting things to say. Beyond that, as I said, lots of writing, and I'm starting to get ready for Black Hat and DEF CON. Black Hat's coming up first week of August. I'll be back out in Las Vegas and would love to see members of the Quiet Riot out there at either or both of those shows.
Thank you, Curtis. Well, we also have to thank Mr. Brian Chee as well. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming week? Where can people find you?
I'm going to be calling a bunch of my research buddies and saying, hey, you need to go and watch TWiT and then go call Andrew Feldman. I think that's going to be a fun time. But you know what? I'm also going to be working on trying to find more guests for TWiT. And you're welcome to throw me suggestions. I am ADVNETLAB on Twitter, so Advanced Net Lab. But you're also welcome to throw me some email. My email address is Cheebert, spelled CHEEBERT, at twit.tv. Or you're also welcome to throw email at TWiT at twit.tv, and that'll hit all the hosts. We've got all kinds of stuff coming up. We've got more people down at the edge that are using neural processing. So that's kind of one of the themes that I wanted to keep following. And looking forward to hearing your suggestions. And even if you're listening to us and having to use a translator, throw me an email in your native language. As long as you understand, I'm going to be using a machine translation. We'll be happy to try and answer your questions in your native language. Anyway, take care. Love to hear from you. And take care, everybody.
Thank you, Cheebert. Well, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and listen to our show and get your enterprise and IT goodness. So we want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise and IT news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There you'll find all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, of course, the guest information, and the links of the stories that we do during the show. But more importantly there, next to those videos, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version or your video version of your choice and listen on any one of your applications, any one of your devices, or any one of your podcast applications, because we're on all of them, and it's the best way to support the show by subscribing. Plus, you may have also heard, that's right, we also have Club TWiT as well. It's a members-only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't get anywhere else, and it's only $7 a month. That's right. There are a lot of great things about Club TWiT, and one of them is the exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. I'm on it right now. Chat with the hosts, chat with us, chat with the producers, separate discussion channels, plus special events that show up on there as well. Lots of fun stuff. So definitely check that out. Join Club TWiT, be part of the movement. Go to twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, Club TWiT now offers corporate group plans as well. It's a great way to give your team access to our ad-free tech podcast. The plans start with 5 members at a discounted rate of $6 each per month, and you can add as many seats as you like. Now, this is a great way for all your departments, IT departments, developers, tech teams, sales teams, support teams, to have access to all of our podcasts. And just like regular memberships, they can join the TWiT Discord server and get the TWiT Plus bonus feed as well. That's at twit.tv/Club TWiT. After you subscribe, impress your family members, your coworkers, your friends with the gift of TWiT, because we like doing this show, and it's a great way to share lots of fun tech topics with people, and I think they'll find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely subscribe and support the show. Now, also remember, we do the show live. That's right, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Friday. So if you're available that time, come join the show after you subscribe. Join it at live.twit.tv. That's the website. There you'll find all of our streams. We're streaming on everywhere. And in fact, you can watch the show live. Come to behind the scenes, see what's going on. Come see how the pizza's made, all the fun stuff, all the banter. But of course, if you're going to watch the show live, come join our IRC, our famous IRC channel as well. Be part of those characters that are in there at irc.twit.tv. Lots of fun stuff, lots of great discussions, lots of amazing people in there. Thank you guys for all being here each and every week and being part of it. So definitely check that out as well as irc.twit.tv. Definitely hit me up at twitter.com/LouMM. Of course, also hit me up at Louis Maresca on LinkedIn as well. There I post all my enterprise tidbits. You can direct message me for show ideas, have lots of great in fact, I had a really great conversation just recently about where to host your software and how to get started with Azure Functions. So definitely hit me up and send me messages. I love having people hit me up there. If you want to know what I do during my normal work week at Microsoft, go to developers.microsoft.com/office. There we post all the amazing ways you can extend Office and do fun stuff with it, make it more productive for you. You can use JavaScript, you can use TypeScript, you can extend Outlook, you can write little applications for it, you can use fancy add-ins for it, lots of cool stuff. So definitely check that out and make it more productive for you. I want to make sure I thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we couldn't do the show without them. So thank you for all your support. I want to thank all the staff and the engineers at TWiT. And of course, I want to also thank Mr. Brian Chee one more time. He's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer. Cheebird, thank you for all your support. He does all the plannings and the bookings for the show, and we really couldn't do the show without him. So thank you again, Cheebird. And before we sign out, we have to thank our editor, Mr. Anthony. He makes us look good after the fact. Thank you, sir. And of course, we also have to thank the talented Mr. Ant Pruitt as well. He does an amazing show called Hands On Photography. I look forward to it every week. Ant, what's going on this week on Hands On Photography?
Well, Mr. Lou, thank you so much. This time we're talking about video editing again, continuing that little bit of a module. And I'm getting into animations because you can animate stuff going across the screen, but let's make those animations smooth, make them look good, not just boring stuff like, what was that word? Perfect I was talking about earlier? What the heck? Really?
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to need some tips on that because mine's all choppy, so I'll have to check that out. Thank you, and well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca. Just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I'm joined by Tarek Malik, the editor-in-chief over at space.com, in our new This Week in Space podcast. Every Friday, Tarek and I take a deep dive into the stories that define the new space age. What's NASA up to? When will Americans once again set foot on the moon? And how about those samples from the Perseverance rover? When are those coming home? What the heck has Elon Musk done now? In addition to all the latest and greatest in space exploration, we'll take an occasional look at bits of spaceflight history that you probably never heard of, and all with an eye towards having a good time along the way. Check us out on your favorite podcatcher.